particular slides met, the one falling down and the other pushing up. The upper slide, on being pulled down, leaving the lower a double mystery, revealed deep shelves of pickle jars, jam pots, tin canisters, spice boxes, and agreeably outlandish vessels of blue and white, the luscious lodgings of preserved tamarinds and ginger. Every benevolent inhabitant of this retreat had his name inscribed upon his stomach. The pickles, in a uniform of rich brown double-breasted buttoned coat, and yellow or sombre drab continuations, announced their portly forms in printed capitals as walnut, gherkin, onion, cabbage, cauliflower, mixed, and other members of that noble family. The jams, as being of a less masculine temperament, and as wearing curl papers, announce themselves in feminine calligraphy like a soft whisper, to be raspberry, gooseberry, apricot, plum, damson, apple, and peach. The scene closing on these charmers, and the lower slide ascending, oranges were revealed, attended by a mighty japanned sugar-box, to temper their acerbity if unripe. Home-made biscuits waited at the court of these powers, accompanied by a goodly fragment of plum-cake, and various slender ladies' fingers to be dipped into sweet wine and kissed. Lowest of all, a compact leaden vault enshrined the sweet wine and a stock of cordials, whence issued whispers of Seville orange, lemon, almond, and caraway seed. There was a crowning air upon this closet of closets, of having been for ages hummed through by the cathedral bell and organ, until those venerable bees had made sublimated honey of everything in store, and it was always observed that every dipper among the shelves, deep as has been noted, and swallowing up head, shoulders, and elbows, came forth again mellow-faced, and seeming to have undergone a saccharine transfiguration. The Reverend Septimus yielded himself up, quite as willing a victim to a nauseous medicinal herb-closet, as presided over by the China shepherdess, as to this glorious cupboard. To what amazing infusions of gentian, peppermint, gilliflower, sage, parsley, thyme, rue, rosemary, and dandelion did his courageous stomach submit itself! In what wonderful wrappers, enclosing layers of dried leaves, would he swathe his rosy and contented face, if his mother suspected him of a toothache? What botanical blotches would he cheerfully stick upon his cheek or forehead, if the dear old lady convinced him of an imperceptible pimple there? Into this herbaceous penitentiary, situated on an upper staircase landing, a low and narrow whitewashed cell, where bunches of dried leaves hung from rusty hooks in the ceiling, and were spread out upon shelves, in company with portentous bottles, would the Reverend Septimus submissively be led, like the highly popular lamb who has so long and unresistingly been led to the slaughter, and there would he, unlike that lamb, bore nobody but himself, not even doing that much, so that the old lady were busy and pleased, he would quietly swallow what were given him, merely taking a corrective dip of hands and face into the great bowl of dried rose-leaves, and into the other great bowl of dried lavender, and then would go out, as confident in the sweetening powers of Cloisterham weir and a wholesome mind, as Lady Macbeth was hopeless of those of all the seas that roll. In the present instance, the good Minor Canon took his glass of Constantina with an excellent grace, and so supported to his mother's satisfaction, applied himself to the remaining duties of the day. In their orderly and punctual progress, they brought round vesper service and twilight. The cathedral being very cold, he set off for a brisk trot after service, the trot to end in a charge at his favourite fragment of ruin, which was to be carried by storm without a pause for breath. He carried it in a masterly manner, and not breathed even then stood looking down upon the river. The river at Cloisterham is sufficiently near the sea to throw up oftentimes a quantity of seaweed, An unusual quantity had come in with the last tide, and this, and the confusion of the water, and the restless dripping and flapping of the noisy gulls, and an angry light out seaward beyond the brown-sailed barges that were turning black, foreshadowed a stormy night. In his mind he was contrasting the wild and noisy sea with the quiet harbour of Minor Canon Corner, when Helena and Neville Landless passed below him. He had had the two together in his thoughts all day, and at once climbed down to speak to them together. The footing was rough in an uncertain light for any tread save that of a good climber, but the Minor Canon was as good a climber as most men, and stood beside them before many good climbers would have been half-way down.
"A wild evening, Miss Landless. Do you not find your usual walk with your brother too exposed and cold for the time of year? Or at all events when the sun is down and the weather is driving in from the sea?"
Helena thought not. It was their favourite walk. It was very retired.
"It is very retired,"
assented Mr. Crisparkle, laying hold of his opportunity straightway, and walking on with them.
"It is a place of all others where one can speak without interruption, as I wish to do. Mr. Neville, I believe you tell your sister everything that passes between us?"
"Everything, sir."
"Consequently," said Mr. Crisparkle, "your sister is aware that I have repeatedly urged you to make some kind of apology for that unfortunate occurrence which befell on the night of your arrival here?"
In saying it he looked at her, and not to him. Therefore it was she, and not he, who replied. "Yes."
"I call it unfortunate, Miss Helena," resumed Mr. Crisparkle, "forasmuch as it certainly has engendered a prejudice against Neville. There is a notion about that he is a dangerously passionate fellow, of such uncontrollable and furious temper. He is really avoided as such."
"I have no doubt he is, poor fellow," said Helena, with a look of proud compassion at her brother, expressing a deep sense of his being ungenerously treated. "I should be quite sure of it, from your saying so. But what you tell me is confirmed by suppressed hints and references that I meet with every day."
"Now,"
Miss Crisparkle again resumed, in a tone of mild though firm persuasion,
"is not this to be regretted, and ought it not to be amended? These are early days of Neville's in Cloisterham, and I have no fear of his outliving such a prejudice and proving himself to have been misunderstood. But how much wiser to take action at once than to trust to uncertain time! Besides, apart from its being politic, it is right, for there can be no question that Neville was wrong."
"He was provoked," Helena submitted.
"He was the assailant,"
Mr. Crisparkle submitted. They walked on in silence, until Helena raised her eyes to the Minor Canon's face, and said, almost reproachfully, "Oh, Mr. Crisparkle, would you have Neville throw himself at young Drood's feet, or at Mr. Jasper's, who maligns him every day? In your heart you cannot mean it. From your heart you could not do it, if his case were yours." "I have represented to Mr. Crisparkle, Helena," said Neville, with a glance of deference towards his tutor, "that if I could do it from my heart, I would. But I cannot, and I revolt from the pretence. You forget, however, that to put the case to Mr. Crisparkle as his own is to suppose to have done what I did." "I ask his pardon," said Helena.
"You see,"
remarked Mr. Crisparkle, again laying hold of his opportunity, though with a moderate and delicate touch,
"you both instinctively acknowledge that Neville did wrong. Then why stop short, and not otherwise acknowledge it?"
"Is there no difference," asked Helena, with a little faltering in her manner, "between submission to a generous spirit, and submission to a base or trivial one?"
before the worthy Minor